Hi, everyone, and welcome. My name is Lisa Paulson, and I'm here with Dr. Joe Deutsch. We're here on behalf of NAKHE's Marketing Committee, and we're really excited to have Dr. Chuck Corbin here, a longtime leader and scholar in physical education and kinesiology. As a NAKHE Fellow, former Quest editor, recipient of Scholar and Service Awards, and past chair of the President's Council. You're no stranger to the youth fitness space and immense contributions to our field. So we're so happy to have you here, Chuck. We have a list of a few questions for Chuck to speak to NAKHE's response to the presidential youth fitness testing in the United States. So with that, we'll jump right in. Chuck, you're a longtime member and fellow of NAKHE. Can you tell us a little bit about your history with the organization?
Actually, I joined NCPEAM, which was a men's only organization in 1963, and I've been a continuous member since then. So made my first presentation in Philadelphia. It was my doctoral dissertation in 1966, and in 1978, when I was still around, we merged with NAPECW, the women's organization, and we became NAPEHE. We had alternating presidents, meaning every other year was a man and then a woman. So we would have balance among the two organizations. And I've experienced a few name changes along the way from NAPAHE to NAKPEHE to now just kinesiology and higher education. So I've been around a little while.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. So, Chuck, you've also been involved with youth fitness testing over the years. Can you give a brief historical overview and describe some of the misconceptions that people may have on this topic of fitness testing?
Yeah, I can, and thanks for that. It's a good question because last year, as you know, President Trump issued an executive order saying that there would be a new presidential youth fitness test. And immediately the news media jumped on that, and ABC, NBC, Associated Press, everybody had an article. And many of those just had wrong information in them. Even some of the things that came out from the government organization and legislators had wrong information. And it's my own assessment that a lot of them, what they did is they jump on the computer, they go to a browser, they look it up, and garbage in, garbage out. If the AI has information that was supplied by them and it's wrong, then you're going to have a lot of different people giving out the same wrong information. So let me just give, as you indicated, a brief history. When in 1955, I was still in high school, but I remember hearing about the report that shocked the president. And this was published in Sports Illustrated magazine, and they reported the results of the Krauss-Weber test, which showed that American kids failed fitness tests more than 50%, but kids in Europe failed less than 10%. President Eisenhower got a hold of these results, and in 1956, he formed the President's Council on Youth Fitness. Get this, it was a cabinet level position equal to all of the other cabinet levels. But the major difference was that it wasn't funded by government research from the beginning. They said you're going to have to get your own money from corporations and local governments and so forth. So one of the first misconceptions was that I noticed right after President Trump came out with his new president's test. At the time, we had no idea what the test was going to be, just that there was going to be one. So the news article said in 1956, President Eisenhower develop the first presidential test? No, he didn't. He didn't. The first test that was developed was this one, and it was developed by AFERD, Research Council, and a group of people, and this was developed in 1958. I happened to be a student at the University of New Mexico in 1957, and I actually collected data. If we volunteered, we got extra credit, and so we did teams and we went around the schools, and our data was combined with data from the rest of the country. So one of the first misconceptions is that somehow the President's Council started a presidential test in 1956. They didn't. The first one was 1958, and AFERD did it. So that first test was done, and it had pull-ups, modified pull-ups for girls. Didn't have a mile run. It had a 600-yard run walk, because at the time they were concerned that kids shouldn't be able to do that much exercise. It was too hard. And so there were 7 different tests. And in 1960, as a teacher in the elementary school in Albuquerque Public Schools, I administered that test. Think about this. I had 500 kids in my elementary school, and I was now told, mandated, to go give that 7-item test to every kid in the 4th, 5th, and 6th grades. Okay, so then another misconception is that in that same year, 1956, the President Eisenhower developed the President's Fitness Award. No, he didn't. President Johnson did that in 1966. But in 1965, AFERD revised its test, and it dropped the flexed arm hang and put in a modified pull-up. In 1975, AFERD did another test and new standards, and they had some items that weren't necessarily the best fitness test items. So for all of these years, from 1956 through 1975, it was AFERD's test. The only thing the President's Council did was offer an award. So we had people recently saying, even reporters saying, I took the President's test. But in fact, they couldn't have taken the President's test if they were in school before 1980, because the first President's test didn't come out until 1986. And at the National Convention, the President's Council said, we're going to do this instead of the latest test, the health-related fitness test that AFERD came out with. So there was a big battle going on. Which one should we do? President's Council did their first test and unilaterally decided they were going to do this. So where were we as teachers? Which one should I do? What am I supposed to do? So AFERD had a task force, and I was on it with several others. We were supposed to meet with the President's Council to decide how we were going to resolve the issue. That's when they gave this out at the National Convention, and it said in here that AFERD was part of it. But guess what? This was totally decided by the President's Council. They preempted the arrangement that we had, that we were going to work together. So what happened after that? AFERD developed Physical Best as a test in 1988, and FitnessGram got started in 1988. One of the misconceptions that came out after the president's announcement was that President Obama put in the FitnessGram as the national test in 2012, and it was created for the presidential test. No, it wasn't. This was started in 1988. It was endorsed by AFERD in 1994. So 20 years later, it was adopted for the Presidential Youth Fitness Program of Obama, but it wasn't created for that. So that's the brief history. In 1994, AFERD adopts FitnessGram and drops Physical Best, which becomes a fitness education program. In 2012, FitnessGram becomes the test of the Presidential Youth Fitness Program. Just a couple of other quick, interesting ones. One of the reports said that President Carter created the Presidential Youth Fitness Test in 1966. Do you see anything wrong with that? When did Carter become president? 1977. So it would have been pretty tough for him to create the test. Uh, he didn't create the test, and the first test wasn't until 1986. A couple of last ones. Other reports said that the first test included kids from ages 5 to 8. No, it didn't. Some people said they took the mile run in the 1950s and 60s. No, they didn't. The first time it came up was 1980 in the youth fitness test. And maybe the one that bothers me the most is that one article said that the presidential award sparked friendly competition between classmates, and it was an easy and low stakes way for kids to push themselves to be rewarded for effort. The science simply does not support that. So those are my misconceptions, and that's my brief history.
Wow. Well, I know I've already learned a few things. So hopefully, if you're listening, you too have learned some of the historical context. Because when we think about where we're going, we have to know, of course, where we've been. So that's a great segue into the next question, talking about what fitness testing is actually intended to do and what the purpose is behind it. Can you share a little bit about the stated purposes of fitness testing as well as the awards?
Sure. Uh, Going back to my elementary school PE teaching days in the 60s, started in 1960, we looked at the manuals and so forth, and it's to motivate youth to be physically fit. That's why we test, that's why we do awards. Um, it's to drive curriculum, to identify student needs and modify curriculum. So I'm thinking back to my days in 1960 of teaching elementary PE and saying, what if these kids do poorly on this test, and these kids do poorly on this test, and these kids do well on these tests? What am I going to do with my curriculum? How am I going to modify it to meet the needs of all students by looking at group data, which we were encouraged to do? Um, Another interesting thing was I had to report the results of all of these hundreds of kids to the parents. So we had little cards like this. And we were told that one of the purposes of testing was to inform parents. So being the diligent PE teacher, I filled out a card for every one of these kids and reported their percentile scores, which is how all of those tests that I showed you, all of them until 1980, well, actually 1988 until FitnessGram and Physical Best were based on normative scores. So you're the parent, okay? You get the little card that I send you, and it says your kid is in the 60th percentile. That's how we reported them on a test. How do you think the average parent received that? Well, I'll tell you, that's a rhetorical question. They said that's a D, 60%. That's how they interpreted it. And if their kid was in the 30th percentile, they said, my child is failing. I don't believe it. So we did nothing to prepare the parents for what these scores meant. We reported these percentiles, and fundamentally, it means that a lot of people don't know the difference between a percentage and a percentile. So if you take a math test and you get an 85, that's a B. But everybody can get an 85, right? If you study and the questions aren't too hard, everybody can get 85% right. But if you take a fitness test and everybody gets a score, everybody can't be in the 85th percentile. Only 15% can. And if you take multiple tests, you're in trouble. So accountability was it, inform the parents, encourage excellence, drive curriculum. We have to ask ourselves now, all of these years later, uh, did 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 that really work? Is that really what they do for us? So that's my answer to that question.
So, I mean, I think you kind of just said it, but I mean, why does it matter? I mean, why does all this matter? Like, what's the motivation?
That's a good question because if we look at the history of it, uh, maybe some teachers out there or professors out there saying, why are you taking the time to do this thing, this program today? Well, the answer is for years, people have been telling us, we're the experts. They're telling us, you've got to do this. You've got to test all kids on this. You've got to do this and you've got to do it my way. Well, who are you that's telling me? What do you know about it? Well, a lot of those people are the people that have the misconceptions that I talked about. We need to make legislators and parents and the general public aware that a lot of what they think is just not true. I'm tired of going to the movies like Mr. Woodcock and seeing the teacher characterized as somebody who's teaching dodgeball and making a kid climb a rope that he or she can't climb. And a lot of those stereotypes of what we do are based on fitness testing kinds of things where kids are asked to do things that they can't do. For example, the pull-up, we took it out of the fitness gram because too many zero scores. And we did a study here at Arizona State, Jack Rutherford's dissertation, and showed that adult college women who trained for 6 weeks, many of them gained considerable strength and muscular endurance, but still couldn't do one chin up. So I think it's important that facts are important, that we are the experts and we deserve recognition. We must correct the general public. And as experts, we should demand that we be consulted and not told to give tests created by somebody we don't even know who may or may not have expertise. And since we're the ones that administer the tests, somebody else decides what we're going to do, but we're the ones that have to do it. We often aren't given the resources, we aren't given the materials, and we're said, go do it. Uh, Not to mention the fact that the kids may be in PE one day a week for 30 minutes. So that's why it matters. And if anybody's interested, I did an article for Joper in January of this year that summarizes some of the misconceptions that I talk about. But I think that's why it's important.
Yeah, and those stereotypes, I'm sure hopefully do make all of our blood boil, but man, wouldn't it be great to try to shift away from that and portray what we really do? And you made me think about whenever we're advocating or we ask people, tell me a little bit about your physical education experience. And they either say it was good for whatever reason, or they say it was not good. And one of the most common reasons it wasn't good, they cite fitness testing as a negative experience in their past. So Chuck, can you tell us now about what prompted NAKHE and other organizations to develop position statements on physical fitness testing and awards at this time, and what are some of the key issues now?
Yeah. Um, Well, I think it all goes back to President Trump's executive order of 2025, in which he stated that he's going to reestablish the President's Council. That's not unusual. Every president reestablishes the President's Council and puts in his or her own council members, so that wasn't unusual. But the notion that the president was going to come up with a new presidential test, and at the time, we didn't know what it was going to be, just that it was going to be. So several different organizations got into action and said, we kind of got to preempt this a little bit, encourage things to go in a direction that we as professionals would really like it to go. Because all indication from the press releases was that they were going to drop health-related fitness standards and go back to normative standards. And we spent years trying to get rid of normative standards, and they were going to go back to that, and that they were going to reinstate the presidential award. And so those of us in organizations were concerned. And perhaps most important, there was no documentation. There was no evidence given as why we were going to drop what we were doing and add something that was 30 years old. And there was no information about who was going to create the new test. And as far as we knew, there was no input from experts. So that's why NAKHE and that's why other organizations got involved.
Okay, so that being said, then Chuck, please let's get down to the brass tacks, the nuts and bolts, whatever you want to call it. Tell us, please, like, what is the new presidential fitness test, right? You talked about the old version, you talked about the most recent version, we talked about it's somewhat going away, and so everybody was so concerned about what pieces were going to come of it. So can you please share with everybody what is the new presidential fitness test?
Well, we didn't know when some of these organizations you asked about in the previous question, is why they get involved. We didn't know, and we were concerned, so we wanted to do some statements. So in June of this year, and if you want to, if the people who are viewing want to get to it, they can just go to www.whitehouse.gov/fitness, and that will give you a look at. So I just recently found out what it is, but there are 6 test items, and they're in 3 categories: cardiorespiratory endurance, upper body muscle fitness, and core strength and muscle fitness. So in the cardiorespiratory endurance category, a teacher or students can choose to get the award, which is tied to this, either the mile run or what they call the beep test. In FitnessGram, it's the pacer. So they can take one or the other. For upper body muscle fitness, they can either do the pull-up or the push-up. For the core, they can do the plank or the curl up, but the curl up is different from the curl up that is in FitnessGram and Eurofit and AlphaFit, which are other international health-related fitness test batteries. In the curl up, they hold the feet, which is not the recommended way. The plank is now part of FitnessGram. So all of these items are part of FitnessGram. Pull-up is optional and the curl-up is slightly different. The award of the new program is norm-based. The standards are not health-based, they're norm-based. And the award goes back to the old 85th percentile. And since there's been no national surveys, I had to go back and look and say, well, where did it get this? And they're the standards from 1986. And for
So the push up and the curl up, are they cadence like FitnessGram, or are they the old as many as you can do in 60 seconds, or with the push ups, it's as many as you can do until the end of time?
this is nothing has changed in terms of FitnessGram or any other of the health related Eurofit or AlphaFit. But the new presidential test, the feet are anchored, and it's how many you can do uh, in 60 seconds. And the concern and why that wasn't put in FitnessGram is because of the ballistic bouncing. You know, you bounce up and down, and now you're not really in the preferred method is a cadence. You know, use a cadence, and it's not timed. Um, of concern is that this test, as I've described, you could um, do the pacer, the push-up, and the plank or curl-ups, all of which are in FitnessGram. And if you're a teacher, you could do those three items with the kids, and you could satisfy FitnessGram and at the same time satisfy the new program. The problem is that we've got these normative-based standards that have been shown over and over again to be ineffective, and we're going back to the past and we still don't know who decided this, who created this, uh, who are the experts that decided this is what the test was going to be. So that's what it is. I guess we can go on to your next question.
Perfect. Yeah. So those awards that you spoke to a little bit have quite the history in our field. And, there are plenty of people who are really proud of the awards that they've earned in the past and things. But of course, that can be a double-edged sword. So can you talk a little bit about the potential benefits, but also some of the unintended consequences of an awards-based approach?
Yeah, I can. And I've done a lot of research. One of the major areas of my research, I've done multiple studies with my graduate students on this. Um, the misconception I talked about earlier is that people said in some of those articles that the first awards were created by the President Council. They weren't. In that 1958 manual, AFERD had its own awards for the 50th percentile and the 80th percentile. I asked one of my professors, who was actually on the task force that created that, why did you choose the 80th percentile? And the answer was, it's a B, and B is the lower level of excellence. It's not a B, we talked about that, but that's the perception that was there. So when the President's Council, I mean, when the President's Council and Johnson was president, put in the 85th percentile, they wanted a higher level of excellence, so they went for a B plus, 85th percentile. Well, what's one of the unintended consequences is if you take a look at this, everybody assumes that, okay, do kids want this award? You bet they do. They want it on their, so a lot of kids would love to have it. The president, this is the president's award. I'd love to have that. I want it. Can I get it? Well, if you have to score in the 85th percentile, how many kids can get it? 15%? No,
Exactly.
no. If you only take one test, 15% can get it. But if you have to take 6 or 7 tests, guess what? Different kids fail different tests. Our study showed that less than 1%, well less than 1% could actually earn the award. So as teachers out in the school, a lot of us fudge the data. Why? Kid tries hard. We want them to get where they want to go. Um, and but some of the unintended consequences are once you take the test, if you really want this patch and you really want to do it and you fail the first item, how do you feel about taking the rest of the test?
That's so good.
I've got no chance. I don't care anymore. So the message that we really want to send is you need to learn about your own fitness so you can know about your own health and your own well-being. But instead, we teach the message that it's to get an extrinsic reward. And when you find out you can't get it, I don't care anymore. And that's an unintended consequence. That's what we're going back to. And that's where we've been. And in my own assessment of the current state uh, of fitness and physical activity of American youth, the rich are getting richer. There are more and more opportunities for the people that are already good, and the ones that need our help the most aren't getting it. So who's going to likely get this award? It's not the kid that we're citing the statistics that they're overweight or unfit or inactive. They haven't got a chance because we have to factor in heredity. We have to factor in maturity. Kids who mature earlier have an advantage over the other kids. And we have to factor in that parents misinterpret the results as I've alluded to so there's all kinds of unintended consequences. In 2001, we put in the Pala Award when I was uh, working with the President's Council as a chair of the science board, and we put in it's called the Presidential Active Lifestyle Award, and it rewards participation in activity. And if kids are active for 6 weeks and do keep a log, then they can get the award. Anyone can achieve that if they're persistent and they give effort. So it was my sense that this would be a better approach. So anyway, I don't want to go on and on, but that's the gist of it.
Yeah, essentially what you're saying is rewarding the process versus rewarding the product. Because at the end of the day, if you figure out the process, we're going to make progress at different rates. Everybody does, but if kids can figure out the process, value the process, understand the process, then obviously they're better off. And we're accomplishing maybe a little bit of what the goal is. So along those lines, as you're kind of explaining to us, what unintended consequences, the positives that can come out of it. So NAKHE, as the membership base might know, released a position statement about the new fitness testing. Can you talk to us a little bit about that, but more specifically how our position statement at NAKHE might differ from some of the other organizations that you're part of? I know SHAPE came out with a position statement. So can you talk to us a little bit about NAKHE's, but the various and what commonalities? At minimum, if I took all these and put them together, what things are coming out of all of them?
Yeah. Well, I have unique insight because I've been on the task force for all of them. So I've had some input and some insight into what each one of them is doing. So let's just do a quick run through. The first one was the National Academy of Kinesiology together with the American Kinesiology Association. And keep in mind, their statement came out before they knew what the test was going to be. They just knew that there was going to be one. So their position was promote physical education. If our kids are unfit and inactive, the best thing we can do is promote physical education and comprehensive school physical activity programs in schools. And we already have a health-related test that was built by consensus, and any future new test use that consensus of all these professional experts to come up with something better if there's reason to do something different. Um, they also took issue with some of the ways the council was run, and that is the executive director is not an expert in physical activity or fitness. The executive director is a spoil system appointment, somebody who is a political appointment. If you really want to get to the bottom of it, you need to have somebody in charge who's an expert. Uh, they need to fund, the government needs to fund a staff that is professional and there is a science board, but often the science board isn't appointed for a couple of years and they're making decisions without the science board to guide them. So it's important to have physical education teachers and scientists on that, and that the award should be evidence-based. Shape America came out with position next, again, pre-test, and it was fairly similar. Uh, they wanted to make sure it was consistent with their standards. They supported fitness education and evidence-based. In other words, you don't fitness test without an education program to support it, and that there should be professional development to help teachers know why the test was developed, how it was developed, and how it should be used. And that most of all, they said, in making decisions about fitness testing or awards, experts should be consulted. The American College of Sports Medicine did the second earliest pre-test announcement, and again endorsed health-based testing and standards, endorsed fitness education and support materials, and said we need experts to be involved in consensus building method. Um, then, after the test came out, ACSM and the National Academy of Kinesiology and the National Association of uh, Physical Physical Exercise Medicine, NASPM, and the National Strength and Conditioning Association came out with a set health-based standards, health-based tests, fitness education, support materials. If there's going to be awards, they should be uh, not normative because and they should be motivational, and they critiqued the awards that were in the test and said they're unattainable by most kids. So that brings us up to NAKHE. All right. Also, after the test came out, well, you look at it and they give strong support. Our organization has a long-standing history of preparing teachers and preparing teachers to do fitness testing and so forth, and as well as physical activity promotion. And basically, we said health-based standards, health-based tests, fitness education, support materials, evidence-based awards. So there's a tremendous consensus here, and you know, we have good evidence to support the existing health-based fitness test items, uh, and if there's going to be changes in those, we should have reasons for making those changes.
Yeah, exactly. The professional development piece is so huge. And speaking of changes, given your unique position and experience, you were first chair of the President's Council Science Board, 13 years as an editor of Research Digest. So if you were to redesign, what would you do differently? What would you change to maximize the effectiveness?
Well, I would go with what National Academy of Kinesiology and American Kinesiology Association said. The executive director should be one of us, one of the experts. The council members should include some of us. The current council is all professional athletes or professional sports executives. In the past, many of the board members are business people who run sports related businesses. Uh, there's a potential for quid pro quo, and there's also uh, a bias toward sports, high level performance.
Yeah.
Uh, on the one hand, the council and everybody else says, look at how many people are failing. On the other hand, the programs that we put in are encourage excellence. I'm not opposed to excellence. I think that we ought to do what we can. I think we should even do some performance testing. But this test that the presidents came out, in my opinion, if it's going to be given in school, should be given after school for those who want to see how well they can do.
Mm.
It should not be in physical education class where
Mhm.
we're working toward the most. So I would have an executive director that is one of us. I would have a council that includes some of us, along with the other people, and I would have the science board appointed immediately, and they would consult on anything that is being done, and I would encourage the Congress, if this is so important, to give enough money that the council has experts to actually do some of these things and bring in some of us to consult with him. And so that we don't end up with a quid pro quo where we have to give something to get something, meaning money to run a program, rather than doing it for the right reasons. So that's what I would do.
Yeah, money and perhaps support for some policies for physical education, right? If they're going to put it into our field, I don't know that the policies support that anyway.
Well, Chuck, it's an honor to have been able to be here with you today. I used to teach out of the Fitness for Life book, and your name was right there on the cover. And I learned about fitness testing through you. And so since I have this opportunity today, I got to take this chance to ask you the big question, and that is, looking ahead, what do you hope is the future for fitness assessment and physical education? I mean, what does that look like, right? We've gone through a serious change in this world, in fitness, in everything for that matter. But I just want to know, for the guy who's been here through it all, what do you hope for the future of fitness
Well, if you got a
assessment?
couple hours, I'll try to answer. But good question. Let me give you the short answer, okay?
Perfect.
What I would do is, from the very beginning, when I worked with Fitness Ground, we said the preferred method of fitness testing is self-assessment. What we need to do is teach our kids to test themselves so that they can give themselves tests for the rest of their lives and know what the results mean. Do I think everybody's going to go out and run the pace or the mile run? No. But if you learn how to test yourself, you have some sense of what each test item is, and you can do what you want. So I use what I call the Stairway to Lifetime Fitness, Health, and Wellness. And at the bottom of that, kids are dependent on us. They're little kids in school. We give them tests and we help them try out things because they don't know. But by the time they're in middle school and high school, we teach self-management skills like goal setting, self-assessment to determine your needs, program planning, self-monitoring to see if you're doing what you said you were going to do. So that by the time they get out of high school, they're independent decision makers, they're autonomous. And we aren't standing there telling them, you better keep your elbows straight when you do this, or you better not, that one doesn't count because you bent your knees or whatever. If you don't take the test perfectly, you know, you're the one that suffers because you learn how to do it right to give yourself information. So I want to move people from the level of dependence to the level of autonomy. And so health-based, evidence-based testing makes sense because it's not just about whether you're going to die of a heart attack. Kids in school don't die of heart attacks usually, and they see that's not going to happen except to those old people. I'm immortal, I'll never happen. But we need to give them an education, so we have to have it couched in a fitness education program. So I would like to re-envision what I call institutional testing. Many states now mandate statewide testing, and I think it's a mistake. I think it's a big mistake because they test all these kids and they make them come in and take a test. They're not dressed for activity. They haven't practiced the items. They don't know what they're expected to do. And somehow we say, well, we're going to use those results to improve our curriculum. I wonder how many of those thousands and hundreds of thousands of kids have ever had a curriculum modified because of what they're doing. We could easily get the same results by periodically doing sampling surveys of just like we did with these tests, years ago, and we can see whether our kids collectively are getting, um, fitter or less fit. The next thing I would do is I'd reconsider fall spring testing. I was always told, and I know a lot of teachers have been told, you got to test in the fall, you got to test in the spring, and you got to see whether kids improve. Well, you got all of these items. And so every fall, you take up much of your physical education testing all these items, and then you do it again in the spring. My grandkids get 40 minutes of PE a week. How am I going to do that? So we need to mass testing with testing time or time available. And testing should not take up the great majority of physical education instructional time. Obviously, we should fight to get more time so we can do a better job. But testing should always be part of a fitness education program. And I would eliminate awards unless we can show that they do what we say they would do. And I would use what I call a menu-based approach. And I'm going to just talk just a little bit about that. But by that is for K through 3, I would have a menu of tests that are available from cardiorespiratory endurance, muscle strength, endurance, power, and flexibility, health-related components, and there would be no formal testing. They would do the inchworm, the knee push-up, so they could act like the big kids. They would do fitness games for cardiorespiratory endurance, and the emphasis would be on fun so that I think I can do it. I'm one of the big kids. I can do what they can do. And we could talk about the different parts of fitness and inform parents. We've got a new medium available, the internet. We can send parents home stuff of what we're doing in four through the upper elementary grades. I would go to a different menu and pick things up where they could actually start to do the pacer and the push-up, but I wouldn't necessarily give all the tests at the same time. Why not give that menu where we do a unit on cardiorespiratory endurance so the kids can actually focus on that for a while and see what items they're doing, activities they're doing, how it relates to the test, rather than doing all of them all at once and we don't understand the difference for one and what activity is doing what for the other. By the time they get in middle school and in high school, that menu would expand to things like a walking test or a step test that can be done at home. So, and by the time they get out of school, they should develop their own personal fitness test battery and use it to plan their own personal fitness program. So that's what I would see in a nutshell. When you got more time, I'll I'll elaborate, but I try to make it short
Santa
for.
Fe, maybe. Well, we've covered a lot of ground. You spoke to some of the history, some of our current issues, as well as ideas for future directions. So before we wrap up, what are the key takeaways or what messages would you want Pete faculty, as well as our in-service K-12 teachers, or even future professionals to take away from this conversation?
Yeah, well, Joe stole some of my fire on answering this question earlier because
No.
one of the points that I make, and it's a good one, and thanks for that, is that we should emphasize physical activity. You do the process, just as you said. If we do the process of physical activity, the product of fitness is going to happen to the extent that it's possible for the kids' heredity, for their maturation level. And so, if you get kids to do activity and you love activity, then fitness is going to take care of itself, especially if we, as the Pete faculty, are teaching our future teachers activities that are fun and encouraging, and so that kids are learning, okay, if I want to get this kind of fitness, what kind of activity do I do? To that extent, um, I think that conceptual physical education slash fitness education, like our Fitness for Life program, it's evidence-based. It's standards-based. We've shown that over a 20-year period of time, people who take conceptual physical education actually are more likely to be active 20 years after graduation from high school. We should be, as Pete faculty, teaching people about evidence-based, standards-based programs and, and explaining this history to our majors, explaining the evidence, uh, and showing how the standards are established. For example, we know that the pacer is a health-based item, but why is it health-based? Why is the standard set where it's set? We need to help our majors understand that so they can tell the public and tell parents about that. What is the link to health for each health component? And then appropriate practice. In the FitnessGram technical guide, we have a section on appropriate practice. The same way in all of the FitnessGram guides. What is appropriate practice? You practice fitness tests before you give them. You don't just give them cold. Confidentiality is important. Working with partners, keep the information to yourself. The use of available resources. How do teachers find the resources and know how to use them? And maybe as important as anything else, how do we inform parents so they understand what we're doing and they don't make the mistake that I made in 1960 of sending kids home with percentile reports without explaining what they meant? Because I got deluged with parents who thought their kids were failing because they didn't get 60 or above. So, in closing out, I would emphasize activity promotion. If we're going to do performance-based testing, the Institute of Medicine Fitness Testing Task Force that I was on said fitness testing is not a competitive sport. And this new presidential test, as I mentioned, if I were going to give it, I would do it after school as personal best testing as opposed to fitness testing. So my final takeaways would be advocacy. We need to talk to our legislators so they don't do mandates that tell us what to do when they don't know the evidence. We need to affect school policies so schools don't determine that everybody has to test every kid in every grade and send home a parental report and keep a database. Think how much time we as teachers have spent keeping databases because somebody else told us we had to. So I say we need to have our say. We need to work against these mandates, against all these record-keeping mandates, and be careful about thinking that we have to do every precise test and monitor each kid and look at each kid. Rather, have them test themselves and teach them why, if they do it right, it's important. And maybe most of all, since we have limited time in physical education, don't tell us how to spend our time. We're the professionals. Let us do it. And my final statement is do no harm. We follow medicine. Do no harm. And that's my takeaway.
Well, thank you, sir. It was an honor and a privilege to be able to interview you today. You truly are a living legend, and you went through it all, and when you covered all that material, Dr. Corbin, you lived through all that material. So to actually be able to get the history of fitness testing through the eyes of somebody who's not only lived it but been an advocate and on the forefront of being a part of shaping it. We appreciate you immensely, and again, it was an honor to have you on today, and hopefully a privilege to our NAKHE members who are out there and getting the opportunity to watch this very shortly. So I want to thank Lisa. This was great opportunity to get together, and to the membership base who's getting a chance to watch this. We are less than 2 weeks away from the leadership development workshop coming up July 5th through the 7th here, in less than 2 weeks. It's at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, and I think they could probably still take you if you're interested in registering. So if you don't get an opportunity to connect with NAKHE for the leadership development workshop out at UNC Wilmington here in less than 2 weeks, we'll definitely see you at the national conference, hopefully in Santa Fe, January 5th through the 8th here in 2027, right after the new year. So thank you very much for being with us today, both of you and anybody who's out there watching, and have a great rest of your summer.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Chuck.